Opposition party leaders flee Tanzania following mass arrest after protest against John Magufuli's election, while thousands of Ethiopians find refuge in Sudan. Good evening, I'm Aldrin Simpier. This is African Perspective. Sudan is reporting an influx of Ethiopians into its territory as a military offensive by Ethiopia against regional forces in the north of the country intensifies. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he will not have any dialogue with the region's leadership until the military operation there has been concluded. SABC News' Coletta Wanjowi has more on that story from Addis Ababa.
That thousands of Ethiopians are seeking refuge along its border with Ethiopia since the military offensive in the Tigray region started on 4th November. The Ethiopian government confirms that there have been casualties on both sides.
Casualties, yes, there are. The numbers, in some areas you cannot tell because in areas where you don't have access for information, in areas where our forces have not access to yet, then we don't know what was going on. And so in areas, the first conflict was happening, so they may have to remove the corpus, and then we may have to recount the number of personnel we had, and then the number of personnel now we have. So we have to go into then counting of everybody, so reporting back.
The Tigray region political leadership says Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's leadership is illegitimate and dictatorial, but the Prime Minister insists that the region has been defying constitutional order. The African Union has offered to support an inter-Ethiopia dialogue, but Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government says it is not time for it.
Negotiation would be there. That negotiation will be when, as I said, the three objectives are met. If we destroy all the arms, if we arrest all the arms, and then if you bring the culprits to justice, if the law of land is prevailed, and then that's the only recourse everybody has to turn to dialogue.
A lot of information being reported about the offensive is hard to verify since communication channels in the region have been shut down. The government says communication channels are being controlled by the TPLF leaders in the north. Journalists cannot access the region and air and road passages are blocked. Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, the government's human rights body, has condemned the continued arrest of journalists during this time. Coletta Wanjowi, SABC News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it's assisting thousands of refugees who have fled the escalating conflict in Ethiopia's northern region into Sudan, with those numbers expected to grow. The African Union earlier on appealed for a ceasefire in the region, where Prime Minister Ahmed has authorized a military offensive against local leaders who don't recognize his authority. Hundreds have reportedly died in air raids and fighting that has threatened to plunge the country into a civil war.
UNHCR tells us they are working with authorities in Sudan to help more than 7,000 refugees who fled Ethiopia in the past 2 days. This obviously following the clashes in Tigray region. UNHCR and local authorities are screening and registering people who are arriving in Sudan. More refugees from Ethiopia are expected to arrive in neighboring countries. Our UNHCR colleagues are stepping up their preparations for emergency relief by working with governments and partners. We urge governments in the neighboring countries to keep their borders open for people forced to flee from their homes. And UNHCR is also asking Ethiopian authorities to take steps to allow the agency to keep providing assistance to the safety for refugees and internally displaced people who are in Tigray. Within Ethiopia, UNHCR is very concerned for the more than 96,000 Eritreans living in refugee camps and host communities living alongside them, as well as the 100,000 people in Tigray who are already internally displaced before this particular violence started.
This pandemic affects people of all colors, ages, genders, religions, and creeds. But we're South Africans. The odds have been stacked against us before, and we won. This time will be no different. We need a vaccine to manage COVID-19. We need you to volunteer. Help make a difference. Help end the uncertainty. Volunteer now. Visit preventcovid.org.za.
And welcome back to African Perspective. Amnesty International has called on the Kenyan government to process Tanzanian opposition party member Godbless Lima and his family's quest for asylum per its international refugee law obligations. Lima fled to Kenya through the Kenyan-Tanzania border earlier in this week, claiming he feared for his life. SABC's Daniel Kijo has more.
Human rights activists at Amnesty International have appealed to the Kenyan government not to deport the Tanzanian opposition politician. Godbless Lema, a former member of parliament from Arusha urban constituency, claims he failed his country after he got wind of a planned assassination. Mr. Lema and other opposition figures were arrested and later released without charge by police in Dar es Salaam in the aftermath of the October 28th general elections. Opposition parties, including Chadema, ACT Wazalendo and Civic United Front CUF, have since rejected the results and called for fresh elections. The Tanzanian government, as well as the East Africa Observer missions, have said the elections were free and fair. Meanwhile, another Chadema leader, Vice Chairman Tundu Lissu, has left for Belgium after staying in the German ambassador's residence for over a week, saying that he too has received death threats. He had returned to the country in July this year to run for presidency, which he lost to the incumbent president John Magufuli in the October polls. Mr. Lissu had been living in Belgium since 2017, where he went for treatment following an assassination attempt near his home in Dodoma. The government spokesperson, Dr. Hassan Abbas, says authorities have not received any official report of any politician receiving death threats. President Magufuli has already been sworn in and officially opened the 12th Parliament of Tanzania and emphasized that elections were over and that now the focus of the country should be to continue working hard. Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
Well, for more on what's happening in Tanzania, we're now joined by Ronald Ibole, who is from Amnesty International, who is a researcher on issues around Tanzania as well as Uganda. Roland, good evening and welcome to African Perspective. Just a quick one, starting off with since you've made the call, Amnesty International has made the call to the Kenyan government. What has the response been from Uhuru Kenyatta's leaders?
Thank you very much for having me this evening. I wouldn't speak so much in terms of what has the response been from Uhuru Kenyatta, but I would say that Kenyan authorities responded swiftly, not very swiftly, but at some point they wanted to deport Honorable Godbless Lema, but after very many frantic calls from human rights organizations, they relented and have let Honorable Godbless Lema to go forward in seeking asylum in the country. You notice that we got into the situation of really pushing for the police to free Godbless Lema after Tanzanian authorities tried to influence their police counterpart here to return Honorable Godbless Lema to Tanzania after he fled the country through the borders at Namanga. Returning Godbless Lema to Tanzania forcefully would have gone against Kenyan laws, would have gone against regional international laws protecting refugees and also international laws protecting refugees.
Where is he now and his family?
I wouldn't say exactly where he is, but what I'd say is that at least he's been allowed to follow through the process of seeking refugee status in Kenya. And we hope that, that process will be facilitated. And as soon as this is done, then we would definitely be able to speak to it. Remember, if his life was, he was facing threats and persecution in Tanzania, you do not know what might really happen if we actually were to say exactly where Godbless Lema is at the moment.
Is it clear as yet whether the Tanzanian government wants to prosecute him for those protests and calling on those protest action, or was it that it wasn't a preemptive move from his end to rather flee the country?
Godbless Lema was among 4 politicians that were arrested in connection to countrywide protests that opposition parties jointly planned for 2nd November. That was last Monday, protesting the electoral results that had been announced by the National Elections Commission. And so he was arrested and released on bail. You would remember that they were charged with terrorism-related offenses. And so for Lema, really being released and wanting to get out of the country was, as he reported, in fear of persecution, and not just for him and the family. Of course, it is very difficult for anyone to leave their home, to run to another place for safety. So you can imagine how more difficult somebody would have to make decisions as far as fleeing from their country to another country, and especially, wanting to cross the border as the way Godbless Lema did.
Is it clear as yet under what conditions, if any, he would return back to the country, considering that, of course, there is this intention to prosecute him? I understand you're speaking about persecution, but from the state's end, the state is arguing that it is a prosecution, not a persecution. But is there any clarity from his end at all under what conditions he would return back to Tanzania?
Of course, he's not spoken to us about it. But one thing that I would like to say is that the state has said it is prosecution and not persecution. But remember that him being charged over terrorism allegations emanate from the protests that opposition parties were planning starting 2nd November. And so we definitely see this as a political prosecution, and which is one reason that actually international law really is very clear that a person cannot be forcefully returned to their country because they are facing political prosecution. And this is basically in the principle of non-refoulement, which is found in the international, the 1951 Convention on the protection of refugees.
So in the statement that was released by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, she indicated that the Human Rights Commission is calling for prompt and thorough, independent, impartial investigation into all allegations of human rights violations before, during and after the polls. As Amnesty International, where do you stand with regards to this?
We've always reiterated that. We've always reiterated and said that human rights cannot be suspended at any time, whether it's before, whether it's during, whether it's after elections. We have seen the government of Tanzania using lawfare to suppress civic space and freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. In the run-up to election, we've seen many non-governmental organizations that have been closed. We've seen many media houses that are critical of government closed, some suspended, some fined hefty amounts of fines for their critical reporting. And we've seen politicians arrested and others beaten brutally. We have also received cases of opposition supporters in hundreds that have been arbitrarily arrested and detained in various detention centers in Zanzibar and mainland Tanzania. And so we are seeing cases in which human rights during elections and after elections and before elections have really been suppressed. And so we really agree with the statement of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and would like Tanzania to really respect human rights and allow for the freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association in Tanzania.
And just your view then from the international community, and when I speak about the international community, I also speak about the West and also speaking about the African Union or the lack of communication coming from the African Union. For instance, you have Mr. Lusu, who his passage has been cleared to allow him to go back to Belgium. And then on the other end, you have the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who's also said that they're deeply concerned as the United States by these election irregularities, politically motivated arrests and violence during Tanzania's elections.
Of course, we continue pushing for African Union to speak out more, and and its organs. We have the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, who's having their ordinary sessions beginning this week, and will be really pushing forward, the human rights situation in Tanzania to be given more attention. We are also pushing for, Pan-African solidarity. You remember Tanzania really played a very key role during the anti-colonial, liberation movements. Parties like ANC, Frelimo actually, sought hiding in Tanzania and protection and all that. You remember the role that Nyerere played. Yes. In liberating Uganda, and so in the same way, we are really pushing for more African involvement in rescuing Tanzania, which is the only country basically in the region that still has a union. And so Tanzania is very important for Africa, and so everything must be done really to really get Tanzania out of the woods.
Okay, just quickly, Uganda going to its elections next year, 2021. But last week we saw the arrest of Bobby Wine. What's the situation like at the moment? And are there any pressure points as Amnesty International that you could point to that could probably lead to a situation where the elections would not be free and fair?
I would not really want to speak about free and fair or democratic elections, because as Amnesty International, we don't comment on issues of free and fair elections. But we always, as I said, insist that human rights must never be suspended at any point, whether it's before, during, and after election. And we are seeing already before election, there is a lot of suppression by government authorities to political opposition and other independent groups, including NGOs. What happened last week when top opposition politicians, including Bobby Wine, were subjected to as they went to present their nomination papers, should actually not happen. It is tantamount to really infringing on freedom of these people to actually freely assemble, peacefully assemble and associate and also express themselves. So we are actually seeing another situation in Uganda, a situation where even media houses are actually really restricted in their reporting, and also political opposition members are really prevented from, accessing their media space even when they have paid for them. So it is something that we are watching, and we will be speaking more to when even we get closer to the elections.
Thank you so much for that. There is Roland Ibole from Amnesty International, who's a researcher on issues around Tanzania as well as Uganda. So we end the show on this note. What do you wear to work today, or what did you wear to work today, or what goes through your mind as you stock your wardrobe? If it is color, to what lengths do you go to make sure that you match everything? Well, if you are Kenya's James Maine Mwangi, who once owned one shirt, color is everything. Mwangi goes all out to match every attire. The Kenyan Dundee ends this week's African Perspective segment. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.
When I was younger, people laughed at me as I owned just one shirt. I used to tell them, one day I will be a star, and they thought I was mad. I started to buy clothes, and I have 160 suits, 200 shoes, 300 hats, and many other things. Men only used to dress in black, brown, grey, or dark blue suits. These were the traditional colors for men. But God gave me wisdom and showed me all the colors I can wear so I can be different from other people. And that is how I started. People did not understand what I was doing, but they would say I look very smart. And they slowly bought into the idea. And now men are dressing in all colors. There is no one yet who can dress like me. I believe in Africa and the world. I am the best dressed.
Economics Unbound is not primarily a collection of facts to be memorized. Instead, economics is better thought of as a collection of questions to be answered or puzzles to be worked out.
When you look at our economic outlook, what is it that we need which will take us there? And I don't see any other career except education.
Every major problem facing the world today, from global warming to world poverty, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, has an economic dimension.
The principles are very clear. You want to create an economy that delivers more jobs, that has greater equality, that is greener.
A basic understanding with the concept makes you a well-rounded thinker. If you haven't been bitten by the economics bug, there are other reasons why you should watch Economics Unbound every Thursday at 9 p.m.
In this tough COVID-19 times, the nation looking to government for solutions. But the fight against the pandemic has been plagued by widespread corruption. The lives of frontline workers put at risk and citizens denied of much needed aid and personal protective equipment. The president assured the nation that he would deal with corruption decisively. Will there be any action against the corrupt, or will it be business as usual? Watch SABC News for ongoing coverage on COVID-19 corruption. SABC News, independent, impartial.
Former SAA board chairperson Dudu Myeni is testifying at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and that's via video link.
There was quite a severe breakdown in the functioning of the board of SAA, wasn't there?
May I not answer the question in case I incriminate myself?
Ms. Myeni, you have experience in matters of corporate governance, don't you?
May I not answer the question in case I incriminate myself?
I can really tell you now, she's not going to answer any questions on the Companies Act. And we declare this up front, we're not grandstanding.
Chairperson, I do like to ask if I'm on trial or not.
You are not on trial, Ms. Myeni.
Law enforcement officials pounced on suspects allegedly connected to the asbestos audit tender saga.
The operation is covering 3 provinces. It's KZN, Free State and Gauteng.
The SIU got a proclamation to investigate this asbestos issue.
This commission, I think it has brought so many things. People now are aware of what's going on in this place.
He was in charge of the department. You wanted to know how these contractors got appointed. Why didn't you ask him?
They must continue to grill these people.
Sibusiso Nhlapo, Sinethemba Ncede and Johannes Ramotale had been developing this technology of a contactless menu way before COVID-19 was a feature in our lives.
Before the whole pandemic, we started working on it. Ginger, I think of it as something that's been probably brewing up since probably the year 2016, when I lost my office and I had to work from restaurants, and that's all I did every day. Wake up, go to the first restaurant that opens from 9 o'clock up until 5, and I noticed some inefficiencies. I noticed that I'm not ordering everything that I thought I would order while hosting the meeting, because the waiter is either not coming as often as I would like, and I'm having to leave while I had intended to order more things, or if they do come, I'm not getting what I actually requested. Sometimes the orders are getting wrong. So I've always been thinking about there should be a way where you can get your exact order when you want it and how you want it. But I hadn't really conceptualized how it's going to be up until late last year, around December, and then we started working on it early this year, and COVID basically accelerated that.
Since late last month, restaurants have been allowed to open subject to the strict adherence to all health protocols and social distancing measures. These include patrons not touching a traditional menu.
I was able to develop the mobile app to be user-friendly, to be more user-oriented. So now if the user downloads the app and uses it, they will feel like they're still in a restaurant. It's convenience was in my head while developing this app. Then with this technology, like with Flutter, we need a backend. That's where Johannes came in. With Johannes' skills and the way he developed the backend, the app scales with no problems. Currently we are busy working with, busy developing a web interface.
Ngete says besides being contactless, the app can help restaurants to boost their sales.
The user now has got virtually a waiter that is there at the table at all times, which is by the form of their mobile device, that they can order from at any point in time that they feel that they want to order. That's the first thing, because this order moves from them, it moves straight to the kitchen or the cashier, and they're able to see that, accept it, and dispatch the food. The other thing is to help with ease of mind. Patrons will now be able to go to these restaurants knowing that they don't have to touch anything that they don't feel comfortable touching. What we call our high traffic surfaces, which is your menu, your speed point, and things like that. They can simply interact and eat and conversate and order things that they move from kitchen to table.
While this technology now exists via Play Store, its uptake is likely to remain pedestrian as restaurants still struggle to attract